New inflation data just came in that is proving Donald Trump wrong. Him and Jerome Powell have been at odds because Trump has been saying that inflation is down. But this new data shows that he has been wrong and not so fast, my friends. Maybe we should not cut interest rates right away because this inflation issue is persistent and it's not under control. But there's more issues under the hood that nobody is really talking about. So let's dive in to all of that today. But first, let's go into the latest inflation numbers. And we can see here that the new inflation data shows that inflation is actually up and spending is down as Trump continues to slam the Fed. So a new report shows that price increase on US goods accelerated in May, defying expectations, and income levels and consumer spending both slowed. The consumer has been showing signs of a recession for quite some time. Sentiment has been down, delinquencies are increasing, credit card debt is increasing, but there's a lot of different issues with all of this here that you don't really know if this data of the consumer is just short-term issues or persistent of a bigger problem. Well, now we know that it's the latter. It's of a bigger issue. We're starting to see that the consumer is feeling the pain. And because that consumer is feeling the pain, we might be going towards a recession here pretty soon. President Trump has been ratcheting up the criticism of the Fed, and he's always been calling him too slow Powell. But core PCE inflation, which strips out of volatile food prices and energies, came in at 2.7 in May, up from the 2.6 we saw in April, and an increase of 0.2% month over month. So consumer spending rates and income levels in May both defied pre-report expectations of nominal growth last month, with spending declining by 0.1%, and income is actually down by 0.4% on an annual basis. So core PCE is showing that the inflation is up. And so the Fed's preferred gauge shows, right? So Donald Trump and others have always been citing CPI. But like I always say here on this channel, CPI is the biggest lie because you know why? They manipulate all of that. And I'm just rhyming like crazy over here. But the reality is that the basket of goods keeps changing. And because that basket of goods keeps consistently changing, well, inflation shows less and less of what it actually is. So personal consumption, the personal consumption expenditures price index, the Fed's primary inflation reading, rose by 0.1%, putting the annual inflation rate at 2.3%. Now, if you look at just core PCE, it rose 0.2% and 2.7 compared to estimates, which were lower, right? 0.1 and 2.6. So what we had last month was 2.5, but everybody was already anticipating that, hey, we are going to see an increase this month, but we didn't think that it was going to be that dramatic. And I know you guys are saying, hey, it's just 0.2%. The reality is that is a good amount, especially in just 1 month. So consumer spending and income showed further signs of weakening, and there's more signs of weakening underneath the hood. But Trump and the tariffs have been the talk of the town. Everybody has been looking at this and saying, are the tariffs going to cause massive amounts of inflation? And so far, that answer has been no. Everybody's been pointing at the tariffs saying, hey, this is going to be a big issue. It's going to persist over time. But we haven't seen that just yet. Now, there are some other issues here, and maybe it's not the tariffs. Maybe there's something else. I think the reality is that we never got inflation under wraps. And the US is starting to see more and more of these prices rise, right? And a bigger issue is that personal consumption is way down. The muted inflation reflects short-term steps taken by companies to oppose tariff impacts, such as pre-ordering inventory, absorbing the cost of some tariffs to cushion consumers from price hikes, and leveraging loopholes to delay or lower duty payments. Now, many businesses have been creative and savvy in different means to buffer the initial shock, but that doesn't mean consumers and business who were battered by the highest inflation in decades during the pandemic are out of the woods. I think that's the biggest thing, right? So, the White House has even released, hey, we are defeating inflation. This is crazy. The White House is talking about this, saying, hey, you know what? Look at this headline. Look at all this. We are defeating inflation. It's all Jerome Powell's fault. And it's been a lot of finger pointing back and forth. In fact, Trump has been calling him too slow, Powell. Trump has been also, pointing out to the fact that central banks around the globe are continuing to cut interest rates. But Powell hasn't, for one reason. He knows that inflation is not under wraps just yet. So Trump saying all these things and coming out and saying that, as many of you guys know, like, look, I think he's good for the economy, but what he does want is he lower interest rates, which will inflate assets. Once you inflate that assets, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and then we're going to start to see things start to escalate, right? So the survey of consumers, the consumer sentiment, we've been seeing it increase to the highest levels in May, but it's also 8% lower than what we saw a year ago. So, or 11%, excuse me. And then it's 1.7 from current economic current economic conditions, and the year-over-year change is down 16.5%. So everybody's always asking, do you think the Fed will cut in July? The reality is that if you look at the CME group, which I look at with you guys literally every single one of these live streams, so make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and hitting that like button for me while you guys are coming here and listening to me blab with the bell notification so you guys know when I'm going live, that it's at 21.2%. So there's still a good chance that we cut interest rates in 30 days, but there are some questions, and it's not a slam dunk guarantee that we go through this, because even though Trump is saying, hey, we beat inflation, and now this new reading shows some worry, we're not out the woods yet. Inflation isn't completely under wraps, and the consumer is hurting drastically. Now, look at this. 1 in 3 student loan borrowers risk default as delinquency rates soar. Now, I think this is a bigger story that not very many people are covering. And the reasoning is that, now they've had rent forgiveness. They've had forgiveness on their student loans for years. They haven't had to pay all these different kinds of things. And now they are. And the reality is they're just not financially ready to pay these things as they're coming to life. And what does that mean? They've gained a certain lifestyle. They've done all these different things. Well, now their credit scores are going to go down because they're reaching a new delinquency. So their credit scores go down. That means new automobile loans are going to be harder to get. New credit cards are going to be harder to get. New homes are going to be harder to get. So all of these things are a trickle-down effect from student loans. And that student loan forgiveness that they gave for a couple months because of the COVID crisis or the cerveza sickness, well, those trickle-down effects are going to be felt all over the globe. And that is part of the reason why we're seeing this GDP go down. Consumer spending was the biggest and most vital one that we see going down. And we're starting to see that, and 9 million student loan borrowers could experience a significant drop in their credit score due to late or missed payments. Can you believe that? Over 9 million they're estimating. And so we're seeing a lot of different things go on in this, economy. And baseline forecasts are, we expect the average tariffs to remain at 15%, and they think that they're going to fall. And this is from, Deloitte. We assume that the tax cut and the Jobs Act that are going to extended, preventing a tax increase. The long-term interest rates, everybody's talking about it. They're going to be at 4.5%, and that they're going to be some real GDP is going to accelerate in 27 and 28. But the reality is that the gross expectation is of 1.4%, and 1.5% is going to be fairly low here. So the overall growth of the economy is being estimated to decrease by Deloitte, and they're changing these estimates consistently because of what we're seeing. Still have to get out of the woods, and we're not going to keep these interest rates high like we are forever, but we might keep them high next month in July. And we might need to, because the way the Dixie is looking here, it's looking deadly. 97, maybe potentially by the end of this day, we're going to see it dip below 97. That's scary territory. If you look over here at the low, it actually did dip below 97. And maybe last night or so, because I'm over in Finland right now, so it's coming at you at 6:13. So maybe in the middle of the night, we saw the Dixie fall below 97. And it looks like we might see that again here today pretty soon. And that's some dangerous territory we have. The strength of the dollar comparatively to other fiat currencies is dramatically falling down. So we got to be very, very cautious with this. And that's why I think we should not be cutting interest rates. Now, if you look at it and compare it to how the market is reacting, well, the market always loves a weak dollar. We're seeing market open here on Monday. We're starting to see some steadiness here, and we're starting to see the S&P 500 kind of shoot up here to start off, up just 1.4 or 0.14%. So I think that these are things that we need to keep a very, very close eye on during this time period, especially when we are looking at how the dollar is reacting to all of these policies and all of that. So I think that, the reality of the situation is that we're going to start to see this more often. And I think that we should be looking for a big increase here in the market, and this what we've got going on here. I had a phone call come in, so I'm not sure if you guys were hearing all that, but make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. Make sure you guys are hitting that like button and telling a friend to tell a friend. Get the bell notification, get the chat popping for me, guys, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.